always made art ever since I was a little girl. I've always enjoyed painting my cat or painting things in my room. I loved getting messy. I loved that. Those are always my favorite birthday gifts were craft supplies, crayons, paints. It really progressed into an interest to pursue professionally in high school when I developed really close relationships with all my high school art teachers. They were so fun and silly, and they loved teaching art at a high school level where we could really explore technical skill and different techniques. And I could really see myself doing that as an adult, as a profession. Initially went to KU to study art education to do exactly that I really explored more studio classes. It really appealed to me to have summers off to pursue and sell my art on the side at art festivals or different galleries, events, things like that. I actually started selling my first pieces in Lawrence at the Final Fridays Art Walk, and that was such an early victory for me. I had no idea that people were going to buy them, and it was a total victory. So after graduating KU in 2012, moving downtown felt so exciting. I felt like I had kind of outgrown Lawrence, and downtown Kansas City just felt like the perfect fresh start. I was very excited to have a home studio. The 2-bedroom apartment was a must because I really wanted that second bedroom to serve as a creative space where I could operate out of. And so many other reasons this apartment has just been so perfect for me. Not being able to drive, every bus route in Kansas City at some point stops at 11th and Grand. And so I can get around, I take the streetcar almost every day. Even going to the art supply store is very doable for me, but living downtown has just been so inspiring, like the different architecture and just the lifestyle of it. I get so much inspiration from, and so I was so compelled to kind of communicate that, and I started off doing downtown Kansas City scenes that really proved to pay off. Kansas Cityans really have a lot of pride in their city, and we have such beautiful architecture that we don't really have to go somewhere exotic to see beautiful buildings and constructed by different architects, and communicating that and celebrating that in these paintings was very rewarding and proved that I can afford to do this full time. Between making the apartment work, I'm very messy. So painting, paint just transfers and gets everywhere. And at first, it can be kind of frustrating to have new furniture or new things to get paint on it, but I think it just gives the place a lot of character now. When I first went to work here, just mostly consisted of keeping things clean and tidy. My cat likes to get into a lot of my paint and it's just, we're messy. After moving into my downtown apartment, I began pursuing art festivals and different opportunities to sell my art. And I learned very quickly that it is competitive. A lot of the art fairs are not easy to get into. I'm so grateful to have so many collectors that are so supportive and proven to be repeat buyers or just continue to support me, and even new buyers. A lot of people who buy my art, it's oftentimes their first time ever buying a piece, and that's always really rewarding as well. It is a lot of work to get things from point A to point B. The amount of equipment that is required to do these art festivals. But I have a full 5-foot by 8-foot trailer full of things that are for my booth. The tent, the walls, the panels, extra easels, all of the things that are required to set up for these events. It is a lot. And not being able to drive, I've grown to become very resourceful when it comes to getting things around. I remember when I first got started moving downtown, I had these huge bins that are on wheels, and I still have them and use them today. But I have these bins on wheels, and getting them to different galleries or different spaces to show, sometimes the people on the bus would give me an attitude. The bus driver would oftentimes give me an attitude that my bins would take up too much space. And I actually got really good at strapping these bins, because they have these big belts, onto the front of the bus, where they have the bike rack, where people attach their bikes to the front of the bus. I got really good at attaching bins of art to them. I've also discovered Uber XL is a really good resource. It's, a lot of times the driver thinks that I'm in a big group and need a large vehicle to get transported a number of people, but oftentimes it's just me and my bins and loose canvases. And I've also discovered there's this app called Bungee, which is basically like Uber for pickup truck drivers, and they're there to help you move your stuff, usually Craigslist furniture, but that's a big resource for me. I've used that a number of times, but mostly just getting around Uber XL, Bungee. I have a lot of really great friends and family that are always happy to help. I do these 2 shows a year in Austin, Texas, and that requires a lot to get to either carpool with another artist, or it makes a really fun road trip for my mom or my brother, or whoever is up for the ride. One of the struggles that I also had when I first moved here was finding a place for everything, because it's a lot of stuff. It's a lot of equipment, it's a lot of materials, it's a lot of things to kind of find a place for. I think that's something that a lot of artists struggle with, is how to make their space conducive for their craft, and also make it clean and organized so you're not fighting time even more so. One of the things that I really wanted to emphasize when redoing this room was to make it feel like a living room. So this media cabinet was the perfect thing to buy to make all my paint very accessible, very visible for me when I'm working. Having it mounted on the wall, having everything off the ground was really huge, because I would waste all kinds of time looking for little things, little paint, where's that one brush or that one tube of paint, and this way everything's very visible, very accessible. I can grab it quickly and not waste time looking for things. Because I spend so much time in here, I wanted it to feel more like a living room. I wanted it to be comfortable, because it is very hard to be creative when everything is chaotic and clustered and stressful. I mean, I used to get anxiety just walking in here to feed the cat, and so to have it feel like a second living room makes it more relaxed, easier to be creative, and easier to get those wheels turning. Working with a budget, I have grown to be very resourceful. I'm always have my eye open for things used on Craigslist or Facebook Marketplace to make my space more user-friendly and also more comfortable. So this bench is storage, and it's also a really creative way to kind of make my space feel more like a living room. So I am constantly in the process of decluttering. I am one of those artists who like to work on several pieces at once, especially when I'm up late and binge painting for hours and hours and hours. It's difficult to have lots of projects going on at one time and not have a cluttered mess. So this is my space for all my to-dos. All my works in progress, for the most part, are just stackable. It looks like a lot of work, but it is. But when deadlines approach, I've got plenty of canvases. This is where I store either blank canvases or works in progress. And it's just a good space to get things out of my way so I can focus on what I'm working on at the time. So I get so much inspiration from music. I have music playing constantly while I'm painting, and I also drive a lot of inspiration from live music and concerts and music festivals. That's something I really miss during this quarantine. And I go to so many. I mean, there's some months where I spend more on concert tickets than I do on rent. So having music, I think, is just really important. I think it's just another form of art that just helps drive other artists and keeps our blood flowing and keeps it going. So I've got, you know, record player, Amazon Music, I've got iTunes, all of it's always playing constantly. One of the things I love about music festivals too is that it just gives you the opportunity to explore so many bands in one weekend. I've gone to Bonnaroo, Lollapalooza, Austin City Limits is obviously one of my favorite. You know, going to Austin twice a year just for art fairs, that ends up being about a third of my income. So although it's inconvenient because that city's not very close to me here in Kansas City, it is a show that I look forward to all year long because it's such a music city. There's live music playing constantly during the art fair, you know, and not just on the stages, but in the bars and restaurants all along 6th Street. And it's just such a fun environment for artists like myself who really drive and get a lot of fuel from that live music atmosphere. Working from home, it's always been really important to me to surround myself with really eclectic, unique things that have a lot of character. And I really love collecting art from a lot of my friends. You know, Kansas City, we just have such a great community of fun artists that we all have this attitude of we're all in this together. And it is disappointing at times to run into someone who can be catty or exclusive, but for the most part, the Kansas City art scene is very inclusive and very warm. I've met some of my closest friends doing this, meeting them at art fairs, and it's just so refreshing to really connect with someone who does the same thing, because it's kind of a bizarre career path and everybody goes about it differently, and it's great to be able to share and kind of help navigate through this wacky time that we're living in. I love surrounding myself with that. I love surrounding myself with pieces that I have a connection with, not only the piece itself, but also, you know, who made them. I've got a piece of Cale Van Leeuwen's, and I've got my best friend, Aaron Coleman. I have lots of his larger resin pieces in my apartment, and they just really give it so much life. And you know, I'm a representational painter, so it is really fun for me to have abstract pieces that are so different from what I create. This is actually one of my favorite newer editions by Vanya Soto. So this is like a funny story, but last year at the Kansas City Fringe Festival, this painting was stolen from the Fringe Festival at Union Station during prime time on a Sunday evening. And it's such a unique and bizarre story because what I loved about it, I mean, it was very unfortunate for Vanya and for the Fringe team as a whole, but all the artists really just rallied around her. Everyone was so upset that someone would steal a painting, and how I think we all kind of understood how connected we are to our work. It felt really good to be able to support her and buy this print of the piece. And it's a perfect addition to my collection. I throw a Day of the Dead party every year, and so this piece, I just really love the colors, and what it means to me is just how warm our art community is, and how everybody really we do feel like we're all in this together. And Vanya is just such a sweetheart to everyone here in the arts community. So not everyone has to have necessarily a big background in art to appreciate it. I mean, if you play video games or watch movies, I mean, that's all ways of consuming art. And you don't have to be necessarily a fine artist to experience art. It can be how you dress, how you decorate, how you cook. There's lots of different ways to experience and even participate with art. But I do love getting feedback from people who don't necessarily have a big background, because oftentimes it's the most honest. They're not given this criteria of what makes good art. A lot of art is completely subjective, and it's just, you just like it for sometimes unknown reasons. Art is to evoke emotion. So my dad, for example, his favorite paintings are, of course, of Arrowhead Stadium, or you know, stadiums, or, you know, sports, because he's a sports guy. But it's the finest compliment whenever he's like, you know, sees a painting that's not necessarily sports related, but really loves it for just because he likes it. I mean, that's true feedback, and that's what I want. I want my art to, you know, create and evoke emotion from the audience. And sometimes it may not even be clear what it is. And that's what I love about having all the abstracts in my home too, is because it's not very, it's very subtle, and it requires the viewer to kind of think, or everybody gets something different out of it. You know, I mean, a lot of these paintings look completely different under different lighting, you know, so during the daylight or during sunset or even evening, evokes a completely different emotion and just totally changes the space. So I have a background in figure drawing, strong one from KU. I actually excelled in that. I took figure drawing every semester while I was at KU and received a few scholarships, and I really kind of neglected that. When I moved downtown, I felt constantly inspired with downtown Kansas City and cityscapes, and that proved to be a safe avenue for me. However, a few years ago, I was looking to kind of break away from that and start a different series of work. And the perfect resolution was to pick up the figurative drawings, the figures that I kind of neglected after leaving KU. And it was so fun because they're such fast-paced paintings. They are more expressive. I'm looser with my brush strokes, and they're I think you can just see by looking at them that they're far more expressive, and that fast pace that I just don't get out of my more detailed paintings. So they're a lot of fun to make as well. I later ran into the challenge of portraits. It's one thing to understand how the body works and the anatomy of the figure and how light hits it, but it's another thing to make the face a recognizable face. So I ran into a lot of challenges to make them recognizable. I think another exercise that a lot of artists do is the self-portrait, because it's a reflection of ourselves, but also to get the recognizable facial features accurate. It's just really hard sometimes. But it was good for me to push myself, and to get these portraits accurate was just a real challenge. I'm a huge David Bowie fan, and I also, of course, grew up watching Star Wars. So my Rebel Rebel piece is a favorite of mine, but just another one I just struggled with to get it to really look like Princess Leia. It's really more of a Carrie Fisher portrait with David's makeup, the Ziggy Stardust makeup, but to get her high cheekbones accurate, and I just really struggled through that. I did find a redeeming moment about a year and a half ago when KC Fashion Week put out a call for artists to submit their interpretation of what a logo or a graphic should be for Fashion Week. And I'm a very painterly painter, right? I blend a lot of colors. I'm very messy. So to make something more commercial or for a graphic was way outside of my comfort zone. But I had this really brilliant idea, because sunglasses are such a fashion staple for me with my eye condition and whatnot. I had this really cool idea of having a woman's face, but very clean, and then have the city skyline reflecting in the sunglasses and the reflection. And that was, I think, my redeeming moment, because it's a very strong face. It's not necessarily a recognizable celebrity or a friend or anything, but it's still a strong, accurate face with a limited palette to keep it timeless and fashionable, but also to have a couple things going on. It's not just a portrait, it's also not just a cityscape. It's kind of a blend in a fashionable way that I thought would be the perfect fit for a fashion week. Given the news about the 30-day quarantine that's ongoing, at first it was devastating, because it meant that, you know, I do this full time, and I make my income off of social events that are large gatherings. So whether it's a music fest, or not a music festival, but an art festival, or First Fridays, one by one, slowly but surely, all of my events were getting canceled. And that was kind of a scary time at first. However, I am so fortunate to have as many supportive collectors that I do. It's a great time to commission art from your favorite artists because we have time to paint. On that, it also became an inspiring time because I was given this opportunity to really push the art and the craft of making it and not have these deadlines of these art fairs that normally make my spring very stressful. So to be able to paint and create a large inventory without the stress of these immediate deadlines actually became quite liberating. I've always wanted to paint the views from my apartment because I get so much inspiration from it. However, this quarantine really evoked like the perfect opportunity to capture that. The streets are very quiet, there's no traffic, and there's something about having the house plants sitting in the windowsills that kind of addresses the quarantine, but also life and quiet. It's a balance between like the life inside the home and then also the quiet streets that feel bizarre outside. Time management is something that I've definitely struggled with in the past. With an approaching deadline, I have this pressure to have this inventory, and I oftentimes find myself in this predicament where I'm having to evaluate whether it's best to like rush something and include it in the body of work, or if it brings the body of work down. It's a toughie. It's tough to really kind of evaluate what should be included and what should be excluded. A lot of times I've developed this awful habit where I'm so determined to have a certain piece included in the collection that I'll actually what I call demonstrate, where I finish it, complete the piece live at the show. And as much of a headache as it is, I've actually gotten a lot of really good feedback. People come by with their kids or in couples, and they say, "Oh, look, she's painting," and they get a real kick and joy out of seeing me, in my element painting. But it's actually very stressful to have to remember to bring everything with me, and it's usually very hot or it's uncomfortable. It's never the ideal circumstances to paint quite like I've created in my studio space. So hopefully that's a thing from the past.